Laheating! Hello everyone and welcome to my Queer channel. I'm your host Queer-chan, and today we are of course continuing our look at the variety of Star Wars Hasbro Neimoidian figures. Now, in our last video we rounded out the holy trinity of Neimoidians, Gunray, Hako, Dodd, with our look at the 2002 Saga Lot Dodd figure. Today we're skipping even further ahead in time to the 2006 Saga collection, to a figure which, when it was announced and later released, actually caught me completely off guard, and in a good way. And that is, of course, the Lushros Dofine figure, with one of two accessories. His other accessory, a small data pad, which fits very nicely in his hand. Unfortunately, I don't actually have an example of to show you, rather embarrassingly. His original accessories are boxed up somewhere, as is the case with a number of things in my various collections. And despite the fact that I've actually bought several Lushros Dofine figures over the years to customise, and then of course salvage this from, I still, again for this video, don't have an example of the datapad to show you, so I'm very sorry about that. Suffice it to say, it does fit very nicely in his hand and it looks good with him, and again it's a great little accessory to have if you're customising, for example, a bridge diorama or a diorama of the Invisible Hand. In fact, both of his accessories in general are great custom fodder and for diorama building, so already big thumbs up there. I'll just move that aside for now. Now, the Saga collection, in my opinion, was one of the best lines of figures released. It was one of those lines that gave you such a variety of different characters, and so many different characters that hadn't even been released yet, of course, you know, Lushros Dofine being included in that. And it was one of, I think, only two lines, the other being the Revenge of the Sith line, that I came agonisingly close to completing. There were just a few figures towards the end which I completely lost track of, and as a result didn't find in the end. And at this point I don't even know which ones they are anymore, so I couldn't even complete it now if I wanted to. But the thing I loved so much about that line, other than the fact that you got such a huge variety of characters, was that they also released these little hologram figures. Blue for, you know, the protagonists, red for the antagonists, so you could have little holograms of Yoda or Darth Vader, a very nice little Amidala hologram. They did silver holograms for something called the Ultimate Galactic Hunt, I believe, which was, it was basically, I think, normal figures just released under a sort of a silver label, so ever so slightly different. Good for collecting, not really different than anything else though. But the nice thing about the figures was that you could actually, in my opinion, you can make a little chess game out of them. There were enough of the figures and enough different colours, and of course, you know, there was, you know, blue versus red. I've seen people make successful chess games out of them, and it was such a great idea. I cannot remember for the life of me who Lushros came with. I've got a whole bag of these hologram figures, again, somewhere in one of my boxes, and of course I will have to leave that for another day. On to Lushros himself, though. In my Lot Dodd review, one of the biggest complaints I had, one of the points that I kept referring to was, compared to how good Gunray and Hako were, how much of a disappointment Lot Dodd was. Subjectively speaking, of course, I could rave about him, but objectively speaking, he just wasn't a very good figure compared to the first two. The unfortunate thing is that I think that trend even continued on further with Lushros. The thing they did get right, of course, and they get this consistently right with the Neimoidian figures, is how good their robes look. I mean, if I thought Rune's robes had outstanding folds and detail in them, this is just a whole nother level. This is absolutely outstanding. You get a real sense of, again, how the material flows, of its, you know, its viscosity. I keep saying that because I can't think of another word really to describe it, but yes, you get such a sense of even just how they might even feel. The downside, of course, like the Lot Dodd figure, is that unfortunately, in comparison, the facial details are just so lackluster, especially compared to Gunray and Hako. There is very little weathering. The eyes are a lot nicer on this figure compared to the Lot Dodd figure. There's a lot more sort of life to them. But the hands aren't as nice, the weathering isn't as detailed. Of course, you can't remove the headgear. It's just, again, such a downgrade compared to the original two Gunray and Hako figures. The other thing about this figure is that the likeness, very strangely, isn't that good. And I think I know why, because on the packaging, on the Lushros Dofine packaging, the promotional image they've used for him is not Lushros himself, it is one of the other Neimoidians. I think it's actually Ito Luff that they've used for him. Now, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but in comparison, Lushros Dofine actually used the Dulte Dofine mask rather than just one of the generic wide-eyed Neimoidian masks. It gives him a completely different facial sort of detail and expression, which, again, they haven't captured here. What they've captured is one of the generic Neimoidians, and so, unfortunately, despite the fact that it is Lushros Dofine, it just doesn't capture him. For all I know, this could simply be a generic Neimoidian crew member. Now, again, for customizers and diorama builders, this is absolutely ideal because you can just fill you know, an invisible hand bridge or a Sarkak bridge with a number of these characters, and it looks just as great. And not only that, but the robes are, you know, they're perfect for a little bit of repainting and resculpting to make into a Tae Hao figure. I've even seen examples where they've actually cut him at the waist and sculpted legs so he can be in a sitting position, you know, as Tae was. So really, it's funny, but the main value of this figure, I think, is actually in its potential for customizing. Because, again, both in the figure and the accessories, the potential is there in huge amounts. But, again, as a character, as a specific character, unfortunately, it is a lackluster figure. There's decent articulation. It's more or less the same as Rune, except he doesn't have waist articulation and he doesn't have feet or leg articulation. And unfortunately, unlike Lot Dodd, he doesn't have a removable hat. It's an average figure. I mean, it's not like Lot Dodd, where in my opinion that was a below average figure. This is a wholeheartedly average figure. It's a nice figure. I mean, it's nice, don't get me wrong, but it's an average figure, and it's not one I would say that general collectors, I think, would necessarily need to have in their collection, unless, again, they're trying to round out the Neimoidian characters or build a bridge scene or a bridge diorama, because otherwise, as I say, this character makes himself immensely useful in that sense. I mean, I've actually even considered trying to, you know, attempt to build a bridge diorama and fill it with different Lushros Dofines, perhaps with different paint applications and whatnot, simply because, as I say, he works so well as a generic crew member rather than his character himself. And the other thing is that, much like Tae Hao, he's sitting down whenever we see him, and yet he's sculpted in a standing position. So again, not a huge amount of use as his intended character, but as a custom character, absolutely outstanding, in my opinion. I've customized so many different characters with the Lushros Dofine base, and it just works spectacularly, in my opinion. But yes, other than that, there actually, unfortunately, isn't too much to say about the figure. As I've said, it's nicely sculpted, he looks nice, it just unfortunately doesn't look like his character, it just looks like a generic crew member. Not only that, but I think he's actually becoming increasingly harder to find on eBay for it as well. So, again, if you're looking to use him as custom fodder, I would strike now while the iron is hot, so to speak, because the past few times that I've gone looking for him, the supply on eBay has sort of well, depleted, really, and gotten more expensive, as unfortunately is the case when you get to the more modern lines of Star Wars figures. But other than that, that's it, I think. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Hit like, hit subscribe if you haven't already. Plenty of new videos coming out. Thanks for watching, and may the Force and Neimoidians be with you.